Hello and welcome to this brief, it will be brief, certainly less than 10 minutes, guide to answering all the questions for the AQA GCSE History Paper on Germany, or the equivalent Modern World paper, but I'm going to focus on Germany. This is a very quick exam question guide. I have done videos taking you through each of the questions in more detail, and I'll put the link in to the description below for those videos, so if you want a bit more detail. But this is a one-stop shop where I go through pretty quickly how to answer each type of questions. First of all, some very quick tips. When you get the paper, read the questions carefully, underline the key words. The command words, the beginnings, are always the same, but you've got to look closely at what each question is looking for, so be really clear about that. When I talk about these questions, you'll see what I mean. Keep a close eye on the time. There are 6 questions in this paper. That's more than any other part of the AQA paper. Therefore, you've really got to focus on the time, okay? If it's in broad terms, if it's 4 marks, it's about 5 minutes you want to spend. 8 marks, it's about 10 minutes. 12 marks, about 15 minutes. Give or take, you have an hour though for all 6. You should annotate the interpretations, write on them, put your thoughts down. Spending a bit of time planning is so valuable. For just the knowledge questions, again, plan them. If you have you sort of download your information that you know and then you use that to write, it will pay dividends. Give yourself enough time at the end to read through your work, to check, to add anything. Okay, really, really important to do that. And answer everything. You're not going to lose marks if it's wrong. You might not gain any, but you won't lose any. So put something down for each question. Okay, let's go through these papers, the paper again. So the first 3 questions you get are always about 2 interpretations, i.e. views of the past. Now, they may be written 2 or 3 years after an event, they may be 50 years after the event, but they're someone looking back about an event or a person. You get interpretation A and B, 2 written views about the past. Now, in this case, the question, I took this from an exam, the question 1 will ask you, how does interpretation B differ from interpretation A about something? In this case, it's asking you, how is B different from A about Hitler's appeal to the people of Germany? Now, this is a 4-mark question. So there's my first thing, about 5 marks. You can answer this question perfectly well in 3 to 4 good sentences, okay? Look at the question carefully. What is it looking for? Yes, it's going to ask you how they're different, but specifically it's asking you, how are they different about the appeal, Hitler's appeal? One will say something about Hitler's appeal, the other one will say something different. So you need to read these interpretations very, very carefully, okay? And you want to try and underline the differences between the 2. Now, I'm not going to go through an answer here. I do this with the videos longer, but a crucial question, number 1, how are they different? How is B different from A? Okay? You need to compare them and explain the difference, referencing the source. So in other words, you would say that Albert Speer believes this, whatever it is, about Hitler's appeal, whereas Victor Schiff believes this about Hitler's appeal, therefore they are different because. So you could even quote from the source in that first bit, but not too long a quote, just short. Just a reiteration, the first question is always, how are they different? For that, you just need to make sure that you know what one says, what the other says, and explain how they are different. The second question is another 4-mark question, but this time it will ask you, why might they have a different view? So for this bit, you need to look at the provenance only. That's the little bit of blurb above what they're saying. So in interpretation A, it tells you it's by Albert Speer. It's a book he wrote in 1960. He is recalling when he went to see Adolf Hitler. We know that he was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Victor Schiff, he was writing in 1950, so 5 years after the war, and he was a journalist and a socialist. Now, all of these things, these bits of information about them, will help you to understand why they have come to the view they have come to. So you might say, for example, that Albert Speer, he was a Nazi, and he's writing this because he's trying to justify, perhaps, why he came to support the Nazis, because he's saying you were swept up in Hitler's charisma. Victor Schiff, on the other hand, is a socialist, so he's going to be anti, because we know that the Nazi regime cracked down on left-wing groups like socialists. So those are some of the reasons. But for that second question, you're always thinking, who is this person writing it, and why would they have that point of view? And you need to be able to consider that. So think who they are. Think, what did they know? Think, what was their background? What were they trying to achieve by writing this? You know, what has led them to this belief? And they'll always be different. Question 3. The last one on the interpretation. Now, this is an 8 marker, so you expected to spend a bit longer on this one. This is a 10-minute one. This one asks you which interpretation do you find more convincing. Now, it can be confusing, this, because it's not asking you to pick one, it's asking you to talk about both. But this time you have to go back to the content again of each source. So you have to say, well, Albert Speer says this about Hitler's appeal. He says he was reasonable, he spoke passionately. Now you pick those things out, and what you do then is you use your knowledge to explain whether they are true or whether you think they are not true. So you might say, for example, he said, you know, he offered hope and that the peril of communism will be stopped. And you could say, and I know that many middle-class people did fear communism because they feared their businesses and their money would be lost, and therefore that's true that did appeal to people. Or, you know, he spoke passionately, and you know that's true because he practiced speaking and he was able to hold crowds of thousands, and he used the tone of the pitch of his voice, etc. So you're using your knowledge to say whether something is true, or you're using your knowledge to say whether something isn't true. But you've got to try and talk about both sources. So you say, this is what it says, and I know it's true, or I know it's not true because. And then ideally, if you can, you say which you find most convincing of the two and why. Remember, this is not about the provenance. This is not about who said it. People often make this mistake. They say, well, this one's more convincing because he wrote it. Forget that. It's all about what they say, not who they are. Okay, question 4, knowledge question. This is a describe question. It's a 4 marker, once again, about 5 minutes-ish. It will ask you to describe something, fairly straightforward. It's just the detail you need here. This one says describe 2 problems faced by Kaiser Wilhelm. Now I've got a student's answer up here, a good student's answer, and you can pause it and look at it. I'm not going to read through it now, but you can see that for this 4 marker you need 2 things related to the question. Remember, it's not an essay, it's a 5 marker. So you can see here this student has picked a couple of problems and has given some evidence to show why they were problems. Okay, relatively straightforward if you know what it is, but do try to write about 2 areas with some detail if you can. Question 5. Now question 5 is an 8 marker, so that's a 10-minute, and it will ask you about how the lives of people were changed by something. Okay? In this case, it's asking about the lives of women. Now, once again, 2 is the magic number. You're looking for 2 ways in which their lives were changed. It could be about young people. It could be about people during a certain period of time, let's say during the Stresemann era, or during the economic depression, or whatever it is. It's asking you to find 2 ways in which their lives were changed. In this case, again, I've got an answer. You can pause it and have a look at it. This is a student answer. What you can see here are 2 PE paragraphs that focus on different areas of change. In this sense, one of the things is about the way that women should behave, and the other one is about trying to encourage women to have more children. That's 2 different ways, isn't it? With specific evidence explaining what that change meant. And you'll notice at the end, the really good answers will also have a little summary paragraph which shows how significant the change was. So you might want to pause that and have a look. Okay, final question. we're almost done, is the essay question. Now the essay question will always ask you to think about two causes or consequences. In this case it says which of the following is the more important reason why the Weimar Republic was in danger during a certain period. Now what you're asked to do here is to try to talk about both of those bullet points if you can. In this case it says what were the economic problems and the political unrest. Fairly straightforward essay format here. You can write an introduction if you wish, but it's much more important. Most of the marks lie in talking about those two bullet points. You want a point, evidence, explanation paragraph if you can about each one. Okay, and if you can, then write a short conclusion saying which was most important, which was the most important cause or consequences, but most of the marks lie in talking about those two bullet points. It's a 12 marker, around 15 minutes. Well worth planning before you write it. Once again, what I've done here is I've given you a student's answer, and it's for you to pause and have a look at this if you wish, but you can see in this student's answer one paragraph on the economic problems, one paragraph on political unrest, and then a conclusion in which the two factors are linked to show why one is more important than another. Now, once again, I'll remind you, there will be a link at the bottom of this video where you will be able to see more detailed explanations of each of those questions, but this is a good little summary of going through each one. Obviously, you might want to go back, pause it, have a look again. Okay, thank you.